Once upon a time, there was a young woman named Aisha who lived in a small, quiet town surrounded by lush green fields. To most people, Aisha seemed like any other girl. Kind, hardworking, and polite, but there was something about her that stood out. No matter what challenges life threw her way, she carried herself with an aura of strength and calm. People often asked her, "How do you stay so positive? Don't you ever feel like giving up?" She would smile softly and reply, "Pain taught me to grow." What people didn't know was that Aisha's journey had been anything but easy. Her life had been marked by one heartbreak after another. She had faced loss, disappointment, and hardships that could have broken even the strongest of hearts. Yet instead of crumbling under the weight of it all, she found a way to rise, and her story became a source of hope for those around her. It all began when Aisha was just 12 years old. She was the youngest of three siblings, growing up in a loving but financially struggling household. Her father, who worked as carpenter, was the pillar of their family. He was Aisha's hero, a man who could fix anything with his hands and always had a kind word to say. But one day everything changed. Aisha's father fell gravely ill, and despite their best efforts, he passed away. His death left the family shattered both emotionally and financially. Aisha could still remember the nights she cried herself to sleep, clutching her father's old tool belt, wishing she could bring him back. Life became a daily struggle. Her mother worked tirelessly to keep the family afloat, but the weight of responsibility often left her drained. Aisha, though still a child, began to take on small jobs after school to help her mother. She felt the sting of loss deeply, but resolved to stay strong for her family. However, the question that haunted her every day was, why did this happen to us? Years passed, and Aisha grew up faster than she should have. By the time she turned 18, she had big dreams of becoming a doctor. She wanted to help others, just as she had wished someone could have helped her father, but her dreams were met with another cruel reality. Her family couldn't afford the tuition fees for medical school. She watched her hopes crumble before her eyes, and for the first time in years, she felt utterly lost. That night, sitting alone in her small room, Aisha felt a surge of emotions she couldn't contain. Grief, frustration, and helplessness. She cried until there were no tears left. And then, in the silence, a single thought crossed her mind. Am I going to let this pain break me, or will I find a way to rise above it? It was a question that changed everything. The next day, Aisha decided she wouldn't give up. She found a job at a local clinic, not as doctor, but as helper. She cleaned, organized supplies, and observed the nurses and doctors closely. It wasn't her dream role, but she told herself, even if I'm not where I want to be, I can still learn and grow. Well, every day brought new challenges, but she faced them head-on, determined to make something of herself. People at the clinic began to notice Aisha's resilience. An elderly patient once told her, "If you have gift, child, you make others feel seen and valued." That moment struck a chord in her heart. It made her realize that strength isn't always about achieving great things. Sometimes it's about showing up and doing your best. Even when life feels impossible, Aisha's small steps forward started to add up. She saved every penny she could and spent her evenings studying with borrowed books. She began to see her struggles not as roadblocks, but as lessons that were shaping her into someone stronger and more compassionate. As her journey continued, she came to understand profound truth. Pain wasn't her enemy, it was her teacher. The more she embraced her hardships, the more she discovered her ability to grow and adapt. But little did she know, her biggest challenge was yet to come, challenge that would test her resolve in ways she could never imagine. And so Aisha's story of perseverance began to unfold, leading her to moments of triumph and growth. But before reaching those moments, she had to face a breaking point that would connect the pain of her past to the strength she was destined to build. This moment marked the beginning of journey where she would not only transform her own life but inspire others to do the same. Aisha's life took on rhythm of persistence. Each day at the clinic brought new challenges, but also opportunities for learning and growth. She found herself drawn to the stories of the patients she cared for. Some spoke of struggles far greater than her own, losses that cut deeper lives filled with pain she could scarcely imagine. Yet she noticed a recurring theme. Those who found purpose amidst their suffering carried light in their eyes, quiet strength she couldn't ignore. It was during one such moment that Aisha met Farah, an elderly woman who came to the clinic for routine checkups. Farah had an undeniable warmth about her, despite walking with cane and bearing the weight of years on her frail frame. One afternoon, as Aisha helped her into the examination room, Farah looked at her and said, "That you remind me of myself when I was your age." Curious, Aisha asked, "How so?" Farah chuckled softly, her eyes twinkling. "I've been through my share of storms, lost my husband young, raised three children on my own, and nearly lost everything more times than I can count. But you know what kept me going?" Aisha leaned in, eager to hear her answer. "Hope," Farah said simply. "Even on my darkest days, I told myself this pain is temporary. It's here to teach me something." And it always did. Those words stayed with Aisha, echoing in her mind as she navigated her own struggles. She began to view her pain differently, not as an enemy, but as a tool to shape her resilience. Each setback became an opportunity to learn and grow. Months turned into years, and Aisha's hard work began to pay off. Through sheer determination and relentless effort, she earned scholarship to pursue her dream of becoming a doctor. The day she received her acceptance letter was bittersweet, and she was overjoyed but couldn't help but think of her father, how proud he would have been to see her reach this milestone. As she packed her bags and prepared to leave her small town for medical school, Aisha felt a mix of emotions, excitement, nervousness, and lingering doubt about whether she was truly ready for the challenges ahead. But she reminded herself of Farah's words, "This pain is temporary. It's here to teach me something." Medical school was world apart from anything Aisha had experienced. The rigorous schedule, endless exams, and sleepless nights pushed her to her limits. There were moments when she felt like giving up, when the weight of her responsibilities threatened to crush her spirit. But in those moments, she would close her eyes and remember the journey that had brought her this far. She thought of her father, who had taught her the value of hard work and kindness. She thought of her mother, who had sacrificed so much to give her children better life, and she thought of Farah, whose simple yet profound wisdom had planted seed of hope in her heart, slowly but sure. Aisha began to thrive. She excelled in her studies not because it came easily to her, but because she refused to let failure define her. She sought help when she needed it, leaned on her peers for support, and celebrated every small victory along the way. Her determination didn't go unnoticed. Professors praised her for her dedication, classmates admired her resilience, and patients found comfort in her compassion. Yet Aisha knew her journey was far from over. While she had come a long way, there were still moments of doubt and fear that crept in, threatening to derail her progress. One such moment came during her final year of medical school. Aisha was assigned to work in the emergency department, where the pressure was relentless and the stakes were higher than ever. One night, young boy was rushed in after a severe accident. Aisha was part of the team working to save his life, and the experience was both harrowing and humbling. Though they managed to stabilize him, the boy's mother approached Aisha afterward, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she said, gripping Aisha's hand tightly. "You gave me hope when I had none." Those words struck core deep within Aisha. She realized that her journey wasn't just about her own growth. It was about using her strengths to uplift others. Every challenge she had faced, every moment of pain had prepared her for this, to be source of hope and healing for those in need. With this newfound clarity, Aisha knew she had reached turning point. Her struggles had given her the resilience to face any obstacle, and her purpose was clear: to use her experiences to make difference in the lives of others. But her story didn't end there. Just as she had found strength through her pain, she was about to encounter a defining moment that would test everything she had learned and take her journey to the next level. Aisha's time in the emergency department had reshaped her understanding of resilience. She saw life at its most fragile, witnessed the triumphs of survival, and felt the heartache of loss. The experience taught her not only the technical skills of medicine, but also the emotional strength to navigate the highs and lows of her profession. She was no longer just a student or a young woman trying to find her way. She was becoming someone others depended on, beacon of hope in moments of despair. One evening, after a particularly grueling shift, Aisha sat alone in the hospital cafeteria, sipping a cup of tea. The weight of the day hung heavy on her shoulders. She had faced back-to-back emergencies, one of which had been a case she couldn't save. Despite doing everything by the book, the patient, middle-aged man, had succumbed to his injuries. The look of heartbreak on his wife's face as she was told the news replayed in Aisha's mind, filling her with doubt and guilt. As she stared at the steam rising from her cup, a familiar voice broke her thoughts. It was Dr. Raham, senior physician known for his calm demeanor and years of experience. "A tough day?" he asked, taking seat across from her. Aisha nodded, unable to find the words to express how she felt. Dr. Raham offered her gentle smile. "You know, when I was young, doctor, I used to carry every loss like stone in my heart. It felt unbearable at times, like I wasn't good enough." She looked up, surprised. "How did you get through it?" He leaned forward, his voice steady. "I realized that no matter how skilled we are, we're not in control of everything. What matters is giving our best and remembering that even in loss, there's an opportunity to provide comfort and dignity. Sometimes healing isn't about curing. It's about showing people they're not alone." His words resonated deeply with Aisha. She realized that her role wasn't just about saving lives. It was about being present, offering compassion, and giving hope, even when the outcome wasn't what she wished for. That conversation became a turning point in how she approached her work and her own struggles. With this new perspective, Aisha began to embrace the full scope of her journey. She no longer saw challenges as barriers, but as opportunities to grow. Each difficult case taught her something valuable. Whether it was technical knowledge, emotional strength, or the importance of teamwork, her confidence grew, and not because the work became easier, but because she became stronger. One day, Aisha received an unexpected call. It was from a teacher at her old high school, inviting her to speak to the students about her journey. At first, she hesitated. Public speaking wasn't something she was comfortable with, and the thought of revisiting her past filled her with mixed emotions. But as she thought about it, she realized this was an opportunity to give back to the community that had shaped her. The day of the event arrived, and as Aisha stood before a room full of eager young faces, she felt a mix of nerves and determination. She began by sharing her story, her father's passing, the financial struggles, the sacrifices her family had made, and the moments of doubt that had nearly derailed her dreams. She spoke about the lessons she had learned, how pain had become her greatest teacher, and how resilience wasn't about never falling, but always finding the strength to rise again. Her words struck chord with the audience after her talk. Several students approached her, sharing their own struggles and asking for advice. One young girl in particular stood out. She reminded Aisha of herself. Quiet, determined spirit with big dreams but limited means, the girl said. That your story makes me believe I can do it too. That moment stayed with Aisha long after the event. It reminded her that her journey wasn't just about achieving her own dreams. It was about inspiring others to believe in theirs. She realized that sharing her story could create ripple effect, encouraging others to turn their pain into strength. But as Aisha continued to grow, life presented her with challenge she could never have anticipated. This new test would push her to confront her deepest fears and ask herself what resilience truly meant when the stakes were higher than ever before. Aisha had learned to see herself as a source of strength, not just for her patients, but also for the people who crossed her path. Yet, even as she continued to grow and inspire others, life had a way of testing her resolve in ways she hadn't imagined. One evening, while Aisha was driving home after a long shift, she received a call from her mother. There was an urgency in her voice that Aisha had never heard before. Her brother Samir had been in a serious car accident and was being rushed to the hospital. The words hit Aisha like a thunderbolt, and her hands tightened on the steering wheel as fear surged through her. By the time she reached the hospital, Samir was in surgery. The waiting room, usually a place where Aisha comforted others, now felt suffocating. She paced back and forth, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. For all the strength she had built over the years, this moment felt unbearable. The idea of losing her brother, someone who had always been her closest ally, was too much to bear. Hours passed, and finally the surgeon emerged. His face was calm but serious. "Samir is stable," he said, and Aisha felt an immediate wave of relief, but it was short-lived. The doctor continued, "The injuries to his spine are severe. We'll need to monitor him closely, but there's possibility he may not regain full mobility." Aisha's heart sank. Samir, who had always been so full of energy in life, now faced an uncertain future. She walked into his room, her chest tightening as she saw him lying there, pale and hooked to various machines. When his eyes fluttered open and he saw her, he managed a weak smile. "Hey," he said, his voice barely above whisper. "Guess I won't be playing football anytime soon." His attempt at humor broke something inside her. She sat by his side, holding his hand, and for the first time in years she let herself cry. Samir squeezed her hand gently. "That's going to be okay," he said, his tone calm despite his own fear. In the days that followed, Aisha took time off work to be with Samir. She threw herself into researching his condition, speaking with specialists, and making sure he had the best care possible. But it wasn't just his physical recovery she was worried about. It was his spirit. Samir had always been fiercely independent, and the thought of relying on others for basic tasks was devastating to him. One evening, as they sat together in his hospital room, Samir turned to her and said, "Aisha, how do you do it? How do you stay strong when everything feels like it's falling apart?" The question caught her off guard. For so long she had been the one offering strength to others, but now her brother needed her in a way no one else ever had. She took a deep breath and said, "Samir, strength isn't about never feeling weak. It's about showing up, even when you're scared. It's about believing that no matter how bad things get, there's always a way forward." Samir nodded, though doubt lingered in his eyes. Over the next few weeks, Aisha made it her mission to help him find that way forward. She encouraged him to focus on the small victories, learning to sit up on his own, moving his fingers, and eventually taking his first steps with assistance. Each milestone was a reminder that progress, no matter how slow, was still progress. As Samir began to rebuild his life, Aisha noticed change in herself as well. She realized that this experience had deepened her understanding of resilience. It wasn't just about enduring pain or overcoming challenges. It was about transforming them into opportunities to grow and connect with others. One day, as they sat together watching the sunset, Samir said, Aisha, I used to think you were strong because of everything you've been through, but now I see you're strong because you never give up on people, not even me." His words stayed with her, filling her with a renewed sense of purpose. She had always believed in the power of resilience, but now she understood that it was something that grew stronger when shared. But life wasn't finished testing her yet. As Samir continued his recovery, Aisha was about to face a decision that would challenge her in ways she never anticipated. Choice that would force her to reconcile her own dreams with her commitment to those she loved. This decision would mark the beginning of a new chapter in her journey. As Samir's recovery progressed, Aisha began to find fragile balance between supporting him and resuming her career. She returned to the hospital, though her mind often wandered back to her brother. Her experiences with him had deepened her empathy, and she found herself connecting with patients on an even deeper level. One afternoon, while reviewing cases in the clinic, Aisha received an unexpected email. It was an invitation to apply for prestigious fellowship in medical innovation. The program offered a chance to work with top professionals to develop solutions for healthcare challenges, something that had always been a dream of hers. However, the fellowship was located in another city far from her family and Samir. The opportunity was thrilling but daunting. Aisha knew the fellowship could open doors she had never imagined, yet the thought of leaving her family, especially during such pivotal time in Samir's recovery, weighed heavily on her. For days she wrestled with a decision torn between her ambitions and her responsibilities. She confided in her mother one evening, sharing her fears and doubts. Her mother listened patiently before saying, "Maisha, I've watched you grow into someone who gives so much to everyone around you. But remember, pursuing your dreams doesn't mean you're abandoning us. It means you're becoming the person your father always believed you could be." Her mother's words gave her pause. Aisha reflected on her father's influence, his unwavering belief in the power of following one's calling. She realized that perhaps the best way to honor his memory and to inspire Samir was to take this step forward, even if it felt uncertain. With her family's encouragement, Aisha decided to apply. The process was rigorous, involving multiple interviews and presentations. Each step reminded her of why she had chosen this path in the first place, to make difference not only in individual lives but also in the broader healthcare system. When she received the acceptance letter, a mix of pride and trepidation filled her heart. Samir, now able to walk with the aid of cane, was the first to congratulate her. "You've got this, Aisha," he said with a grin. Go show them what resilience looks like." The move to the new city was both exciting and challenging. Aisha immersed herself in the fellowship, working alongside brilliant minds to tackle pressing issues in medicine. The work was demanding, but it invigorated her. She drew on her own experiences, both as doctor and as someone who had faced adversity, to bring unique perspectives to the table. Yet even in this new chapter, she couldn't escape moments of doubt. Late at night, when the city was quiet and her apartment felt too empty, she questioned whether she had made the right choice. Did pursuing her dreams mean she was selfish? Was she doing enough for her family? Those doubts began to dissipate when she received a call from Samir one evening. His voice was filled with excitement as he told her about his progress in physical therapy and his plans to enroll in a college course he'd been interested in for years. "You know, seeing you chase your dreams has made me realize I can do the same," he said. His words were revelation. Aisha understood then that her journey wasn't just about her. It was about showing those she loved what was possible. Her decision to pursue the fellowship wasn't betrayal of her responsibilities. It was a way of living the values she had always tried to instill in others. As the months went on, Aisha thrived in the fellowship, earning recognition for her contributions. But her most meaningful moments came when she shared her story with colleagues, patients, and even strangers. She spoke of resilience, of turning pain into strength, and of the power of hope. Each time, she felt a deeper sense of connection to her purpose. Just as she began to feel settled in this new chapter, an unexpected challenge arose. Sudden crisis at the hospital back in her hometown required her expertise, and she was faced with a decision that would test her priorities and force her to reevaluate what truly mattered. This crisis would mark the beginning of profound transformation, not just for Aisha, but for everyone around her. The crisis that called Aisha back to her home and was urgent. Large-scale outbreak of contagious illness had struck the region, and local hospitals were overwhelmed. The healthcare system was stretched thin, with many doctors and nurses falling ill themselves. It was a situation that required swift action, and Aisha was one of the few specialists with the experience needed to address the immediate challenges. And when she received the call, she didn't hesitate. Despite the new life she had begun to build in the city, her sense of duty to her community and her family compelled her to return. She packed her bags and boarded flight back home, her mind focused on the task at hand. The moment she arrived at the hospital, she was thrust into the heart of the chaos. The hospital was filled with patients, many of whom were struggling to breathe, their bodies weak from the illness. There was little time to think, only time to act. Aisha quickly reconnected with her colleagues from years past, and together they formed battle plan, but the emotional toll was immense. She saw familiar faces, neighbors, former teachers, even old friends suffering from the disease. Each person's story weighed heavily on her heart. She couldn't help but think about her family, who were also at risk, and the many people who depended on her. The pressure felt immense, and for a moment she wondered if she had enough strength left to face this challenge. In the midst of the crisis, Aisha received another call from Samir. His voice was strained, and she could hear the worry in his words. "Aisha, I know you're doing important work there, but please take care of yourself too. You're always taking care of everyone else, and we need you here too. Don't forget to rest." His words struck chord in Aisha. Samir, who had once been the one needing care and support, was now urging her to be kind to herself. She realized that in her relentless pursuit of helping others, she had neglected her own well-being. As the days passed, Aisha pushed herself harder, driven by the urgent need to save lives. She found herself working long hours, sleeping little, and sacrificing her own health for the sake of her patients. But her body began to feel the strain, her energy waned, and she struggled to keep up with the demands of the situation. The realization hit her with force. She couldn't pour from an empty cup. She needed to find balance, to care for herself as much as she cared for others. One night, after a particularly exhausting shift, Aisha found herself alone in the hospital's break room, staring blankly at the wall. The weight of everything, the pressure, the exhaustion, the uncertainty, became too much to bear. She wanted to break down, but she couldn't afford to. There were still people who needed her. Just as she was about to give in to the overwhelming emotions, she remembered Samir's words and something shifted inside her. She had to take a step back, even if just for a moment, and allow herself the grace to recharge. She couldn't help others if she wasn't whole herself. The next day, Aisha made conscious decision to pace herself. She delegated tasks when necessary, took short breaks, and asked for help. She also began to open up to her colleagues about her struggles. It wasn't easy for her. Aisha had always been the one others leaned on. But she realized that vulnerability was not weakness. In fact, it made her stronger. By showing her team that she too was human, she created an environment where everyone felt empowered to support one another. Over time, Aisha's health improved and she found rhythm that allowed her to continue serving her community without sacrificing her well-being. She saw firsthand the power of collaboration, self-compassion, and the importance of maintaining a sense of balance. Even in the most challenging of circumstances, she came to understand that strength was not just about endurance. It was about knowing when to rest, when to lean on others, and when to trust that everything would eventually fall into place. As the outbreak began to subside and the hospital returned to a more manageable state, Aisha reflected on the journey she had taken. She had come full circle. From a young woman filled with doubt and fear to a seasoned professional who had learned the true meaning of resilience, she had turned pain into strength, not by enduring without rest, but by embracing her vulnerability and trusting in the support of others. Her time in the crisis had solidified her commitment to her community, but it had also ignited new passion to use her experience to create systemic change in healthcare. She wanted to ensure that future challenges, whether personal or professional, were met with compassion, balance, and innovation. This realization marked the beginning of a new phase in her journey, one where she would not only work to heal individuals, but also to address the broader issues within the healthcare system itself. As she returned to her new city, ready to continue her work, Aisha knew that her story was far from over. The lessons she had learned, the relationships she had built, and the strength she had discovered within herself would guide her as she moved forward, ready to take on the next challenge with renewed purpose and unwavering hope. After returning to her new city, Aisha felt a sense of clarity that she hadn't had in a long time. The crisis in her hometown had been a wake-up call, reminding her of the fragility of life and the importance of balance. It had also deepened her understanding of the healthcare system's flaws, especially in times of extreme pressure. She couldn't just go back to business as usual. She had to push for change. The experience had ignited new drive in her. She now wanted to not only be part of the healing process, but to help shape the future of healthcare. Aisha began to use her position in the fellowship to speak up about the need for systemic reform. She wasn't just focused on individual patient care anymore, as she was thinking about how healthcare could be more equitable, more sustainable, and more human-centered. With her first-hand experience in the hospital during the outbreak, she saw the glaring gaps in the system, how resources were misallocated, how burnout among healthcare workers was common, and how patients often received care that was fragmented and impersonal. She started to push for changes within her fellowship project, advocating for a more holistic approach to medical care that took into account not only the physical needs of patients, but also their emotional and mental well-being. She proposed initiatives that integrated mental health professionals into medical teams, ensuring that patients' psychological needs were addressed alongside their physical recovery. She also began to explore ways to create more supportive environments for healthcare workers where self-care and mental health were prioritized. However, despite her passion, Aisha encountered resistance. Some of her colleagues were skeptical about her ideas, dismissing them as too idealistic. The system, they argued, was too entrenched to change. They pointed out the financial limitations and the political challenges that came with implementing reform. At times, Aisha felt discouraged. She questioned whether she was being naive in believing that real change could happen, especially when the system she was working within seemed so rigid and resistant to innovation. One evening, after a particularly challenging meeting, Aisha sat at her desk staring at her notes. She felt the weight of the doubt creeping in again. But then she thought about her journey, about all the times she had been told she couldn't do something or that her dreams were too big. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, urging her to never give up on what mattered most. Her brother's words about resilience reminded her that change didn't come easily, but it was possible if she kept pushing forward one step at a time. Just as she was beginning to gather herself, she received a call from her mother. Samir had made significant progress in his recovery and had even started small online business related to physical therapy equipment. He was no longer the same person he had been before the accident. He had found new purpose, one that involved helping others who were going through similar struggles. Aisha could hear the pride in her mother's voice as she told her the news. For the first time in a while, Aisha felt a deep sense of gratitude. Samir's journey had become a symbol of hope, not just for her, but for so many others. The conversation with her mother reminded Aisha of the importance of perseverance and how transformation was often slow and difficult, but always worth it in the end. She realized that even if she faced resistance in her efforts for change, it was still possible to make a difference. The process would take time, but it was essential to keep challenging the status quo. With renewed determination, Aisha decided to approach her next meeting with a new perspective. Instead of focusing on the obstacles, she would focus on the solutions she could bring to the table. She would lean into the support of those who believed in her vision, rallying colleagues who shared her passion for systemic reform. She knew that change wouldn't happen overnight, but it would start with small steps, and she was ready to take those steps no matter how difficult. As Aisha dove back into her work, she also began to reconnect with the people who had inspired her along the way. She started mentoring younger doctors and medical students, sharing her story of resilience, failure, and the importance of persistence. Her journey had always been about turning pain into strength, and now she realized it was about using that strength to fuel her mission of creating lasting change. She had come so far, but she understood that the real work was just beginning. Aisha's work in the fellowship began to gain recognition, and slowly her ideas started to take root. The conversations she had started were beginning to influence how her colleagues thought about healthcare. Her passion and dedication were contagious, and she found herself surrounded by a team of like-minded individuals who shared her vision for a better, more compassionate system. However, despite these small victories, Aisha knew the hardest part was still ahead. She was about to face a decision that would test the very foundation of her commitment to reform and ask whether she could truly balance her dreams with her responsibilities. This challenge would not only shape her future, but would also determine the course of her legacy. As Aisha's work began to gain momentum, she found herself at crossroads. The initiatives she had started were beginning to show real potential, and she was invited to present her ideas to a national conference on healthcare reform. It was an incredible opportunity, but it came with its own set of challenges. The conference would take place in a different country, and it was scheduled just as Aisha's fellowship was nearing its end. Her commitment to her work, to Samir, and to her own dreams weighed heavily on her. The decision wasn't easy. Aisha had always been someone who thrived on helping others, but she also recognized that her own growth had become just as important. The fellowship had been a transformative experience, allowing her to refine her vision for healthcare reform and to build relationships with key influencers in the field. The chance to present her ideas on a larger stage was an opportunity she couldn't afford to pass up, but it would mean leaving behind the people she had become close to, including Samir, who had just begun to regain his independence. As the date of the conference drew closer, Aisha found herself torn. Samir was doing well, and though he still relied on her support from time to time, he was more independent than ever, but their relationship had shifted. Samir was no longer the person who needed constant care. He was finding his own path, carving out future for himself. Aisha knew that her absence would not hinder his progress, but the emotional connection they shared felt like an anchor, and the thought of leaving him behind felt like an impossible choice. At the same time, Aisha's colleagues and mentors were pushing her to take the next step, to share her vision for healthcare reform with a global audience. This was her chance to make an impact, to inspire others to think differently about how healthcare could be restructured to prioritize both patients and providers. Aisha had always known that change on a large scale was difficult, but she had also come to realize that it was necessary. If she wanted to create a future where people like Samir didn't have to fight so hard for access to quality care, she had to take this leap. In the midst of this internal conflict, Aisha reached out to her mother for advice. Her mother, ever wise and calm, listened to her daughter's struggles and then said something that resonated deeply. Aisha, you've always been the one to carry the weight for others, but now it's time to let your light shine. Samir is strong and he has his own path to follow. You've given him the strength to believe in himself, and now it's time for you to do the same for yourself. Her mother's words struck chord in Aisha. She realized that this wasn't about leaving her brother behind. It was about empowering both herself and Samir to continue growing. By pursuing her own dreams, she was setting an example of strength, resilience, and the importance of self-fulfillment. Her journey wasn't just about helping others. It was about showing them that they could rise above their challenges, just as she had. With renewed sense of purpose, Aisha made the decision to attend the conference. The night before she left, she sat down with Samir and told him about her choice. He listened quietly, his eyes filled with understanding. When she finished speaking, he smiled and said, "You're doing this for all of us, Aisha. Don't worry about me. I've got this just like you've always taught me. Go and make the world better." Aisha was overwhelmed with gratitude. Samir's words, his confidence in her, gave her the strength to walk away from that conversation feeling not just confident but empowered. The next morning, she boarded the plane with a sense of excitement and anticipation, ready to take on the next chapter of her journey. The conference was everything Aisha had hoped for and more. She presented her ideas with passion and conviction, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. People from all over the world approached her with interest, eager to collaborate and bring her ideas to life. Aisha felt a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before. She knew that this was just the beginning of something much larger, and she was ready to commit herself fully to her mission of reforming healthcare systems globally. But even as she embraced the excitement of this new phase, Aisha never lost sight of her roots. She continued to check in on Samir, offering her support from afar and encouraging him as he continued to build his own life. The bond they shared, the lessons they had learned together, remained at the heart of everything she did. Aisha knew that her journey was not just about individual success. It was about creating a ripple effect that would inspire others to find their strength and follow their own paths. As Aisha returned home, her work began to take on new focus. The connections she had made at the conference opened doors to international collaborations, and soon she was traveling frequently, advocating for policy changes and developing programs that could bring her vision to life. But as her career soared, new challenge emerged, one that would force Aisha to confront truth she had long ignored. It was realization that would test everything she had worked for and lead her to question what she truly valued most. Aisha's career continued to flourish. Her work in healthcare reform was making waves across international platforms, and she had become a recognized voice in the field. Yet, despite the outward success, there was growing unease inside her. The whirlwind of conferences, collaborations, and constant travel had taken a toll on her personal life. She was often away from home, caught in a cycle of meetings, projects, and public speaking engagements. While her professional accomplishments were rewarding, Aisha began to realize that something was missing. Balance she had always advocated for but had yet to find for herself. The realization hit her one evening as she sat in her hotel room staring at a set of emails, each one demanding more of her time and attention. The excitement of the conferences had faded, and now the constant business felt like an obligation. She thought about Samir, her family, and her roots, about how much they had shaped who she was. She had poured everything into helping others, but somewhere along the way she had neglected her own well-being. It was during this time that Aisha received a call from her mother, who asked her how she was doing. Aisha's voice trembled as she responded, "I'm doing good, but I don't feel like I'm truly living anymore, Mom. I've been so focused on everyone else that I've forgotten what it feels like to take breath for myself." Her mother listened patiently and then said something that changed Aisha's perspective forever. "Aisha, you've always been strong, but true strength isn't about doing everything for everyone. It's about knowing when to stop, reflect, and take care of the person who gives so much to the world. You can't help others if you're running on empty." Aisha's mother's words were a wake-up call. She had spent years building life dedicated to reforming healthcare and empowering others, but she had ignored the most important part, herself. She realized that in her quest to make global impact, she had neglected the small, intimate parts of life that brought her the most joy, the quiet moments with her family, the comfort of routine, and the time to simply be present. These were the things she had been missing. The next few weeks were transformative for Aisha. She took a step back from her intense travel schedule and allowed herself to focus on the aspects of life that had long been overshadowed by her ambitions. She spent more time with Samir, helping him grow his business and watching him become the person she always knew he could be. They would laugh over dinner, share stories, and for the first time in a long while, Aisha felt like she was truly living. But she also knew that she couldn't abandon the mission that had become her life work. Her vision for healthcare reform still burned brightly within her, but she understood now that it wasn't about doing everything alone. True leadership, she realized, came from building community, fostering collaboration, and trusting that others could carry the torch alongside her. The world didn't need her to sacrifice herself in order to make difference. That needed her to be her best self emotionally, physically, and mentally. Aisha started to refocus her efforts on sustainable long-term change. Working with a team of people who shared her vision and values, together they created programs that prioritized the well-being of healthcare workers, integrated mental health support into medical systems, and ensured that healthcare policies were both compassionate and practical. Aisha still traveled and spoke at conferences, but now she did so with intention. She made sure to carve out time for herself, for her family, and for the quiet moments that grounded her. In this new phase of her life, Aisha found the balance she had been searching for. She had learned that making a meaningful impact didn't mean sacrificing her happiness or well-being. It meant recognizing the importance of both personal and professional fulfillment. She knew now that strength came not just from resilience, but from knowing when to stop and recharge, from asking for help, and from acknowledging that she didn't have to do it all alone. Aisha's journey had come full circle. She had turned pain into strength, yes, but she had also discovered that true strength came from a place of love, compassion, and self-care. Her story wasn't just about overcoming adversity. It was about learning to thrive, not just survive. And now, as Aisha looked ahead, she saw a world full of possibilities. She was ready to continue her work, but with newfound clarity and balance. She knew that her mission to reform healthcare, to change lives, and to inspire others would continue, but now it would come from a place of wholeness. This is where you come in. Just like Aisha, you too have the power to turn your struggles into strength. Whether it's in your career, relationships, or personal journey, remember that true resilience isn't about pushing yourself until you break. It's about knowing when to stop, reflect, and recharge. Take the time to care for yourself to end. Nourish your body, mind, and soul. When you do, you'll find that your capacity to make difference in the world will only grow stronger. If Aisha's story has inspired you, it's time to take action. Find your balance. Prioritize your well-being, and remember, you don't have to do it alone. There's community out there ready to support you, just as Aisha found hers. Take the first step today, because your journey too is worth living fully.